It is the final round of this year's MotoGP World Championship, and I have got the story from Friday and Saturday, and if you stay till the end, you'll find out my race predictions for the Sunday main Grand Prix. But if you could first hit subscribe, help us grow here on YouTube, and a fun little fact, I basically respond to every single comment, so come talk some MotoGP. So for those who have been under a rock, yes, we are racing the final round of MotoGP in Catalonia because of the flooding in Valencia. And right out the gate Friday morning, we had a very interesting name at the top of the timesheets in Free Practice 1. It was Taka Nakagami, racing in his last MotoGP weekend as a full-time rider. Now, it was a little shocking to see a Honda at the top of the timesheets, and yes, he did put in a soft tire when most people didn't, giving him a little bit of an edge, but it was still cool to see him at the top, getting some TV coverage before he says bye-bye. But in second practice, it was a little more back to normal with Pecco Bagnaia being at the top, but not so normal that we saw Marco Bezzecchi right beside him. And we knew Aleix Espargaro was going to be fast, even though the Aprilia hasn't been very good this season. Aleix loves this circuit. I mean, he grew up on it. I think turn 3 maybe? And the other Honda of Johan Zarco, the LCR guys, showing up this weekend, he was at the top spot for a long time before finally pushed back to P4, but he goes straight through to Q2 yet again. And if you're wondering why the guys from LCR Honda seem to outshine the Honda factory boys every single week, I'd love to know too. What's going on there? Now, what was a little bit of a surprise was Jorge Martin only managing P5. He doesn't seem to be that indestructible Friday force he's just so constantly is. But let's move on to qualifying, because in Q1 it was the former Yamaha factory teammates of Franco Morbidelli and Fabio Quartararo, only one of them still on a Yamaha, that moved through into Q2. Quartararo doesn't end up climbing all that much higher in Q2, only manages a P10 start. But Franco Morbidelli found himself in P5 right behind all the title contenders. As I said before, it didn't seem like Jorge Martin has that killer instinct this week. Is he playing it conservative? We know the track can be slippery, a lot of people can make mistakes, you can crash. He doesn't want an injury, he doesn't want a DNF, he wants to start near the front, but does he need to start on pole? No. And he kind of rode like a guy who wasn't expecting to. In fact, he actually looks for Aleix Espargaro, latches on and gets a tow from the local boy around the track and pulls him into P4 while Aleix goes P2. And on the flip side, it was Pecco Bagnaia doing all the hard work by himself, managing that pole position and dragging Marc Marquez to a P3 front row start. Now, for those who've been saying Jorge Martin has this all wrapped up, 24 points is just too much for Pecco Bagnaia to make up in one weekend, I want you to take a look at the start of the sprint. Because we've seen Enea Bastianini dive bomb into turn 1 before and cause massive chaos, and today, it was a dive bomb that actually worked out and gave him the whole shot out of turn 1. And further back in the mix, it was Marc Marquez literally ripping the front of Pedro Acosta's KTM completely off the motorcycle. Now, luckily in the sprint, Jorge Martin and Pecco Bagnaia did kind of skip most of the mayhem, but that's the danger of starting fourth where Martin is. It doesn't take much for someone like Franco Morbidelli, Pedro Acosta, and Enea Bastianini coming from behind you to really screw up your entire weekend and maybe your entire championship run. But in Saturday's sprint, both of our title contenders did what they had to do. Pecco Bagnaia gets to the front, he stays there while Jorge Martin battled it out with Enea Bastianini all race long, probably the best battle of the race. And in the end, even though Jorge had led basically the entire middle of the race, Enea makes a pass on the last lap, gets second, Jorge has to settle for third, and only needs to finish 10th or better tomorrow in the main Grand Prix to get his name added to the Tower of Champions. So that brings me to what I think will happen at Sunday's main Grand Prix. Do I think Aleix Espargaro has enough firepower to take it to Pecco Bagnaia? I don't think so. That is not because I'm doubting Aleix Espargaro. I think he's a great rider, especially at this track. I just think the Aprilia is a little outmatched, and he is not going to have that winning killer instinct, I don't think. Having his best friend, his best buddy in the paddock, Jorge Martin, fighting for the title, I don't think he wants to get caught up in the mix here. And so who's going to win the race, you ask? I think Pecco Bagnaia will win the race, and Jorge Martin will also finish on the podium, being your 2024 world champion. But do not count out Marc Marquez, Enea Bastianini, and Pedro Acosta throwing some fireworks at the front of this race that may complicate things. We could see some things go down at the beginning of this race into turn 1.